Hey everybody, it is time for season 2 of Rossmann Realty. I've decided to keep this one under wraps until I'm finished with the space for obvious reasons. So the last space did not go well, and I had walked away from negotiations and just said screw it. There was too much wrong with it. They have a demolition clause. Even after negotiating, we've only got it to a point where it's slightly less than what construction's going to cost. And as time goes on, they deduct $20K a year. So if they kick me out in 3 years, I put $220K into a space, I only get $140K back. Nah. They asked for the last 3 months rather than the first 3 months, and they tried to claim that was standard as a deposit, which shows me that there's a propensity there for dishonesty and the propensity to try to slip the tip in when you can. There was the super being a dick. There was the high construction cost. There's just too much wrong with that place. And I just walked away. I talked about it in the video I did. Thank you for reminding me of the advice that I've given, and I went over it in the video that I did, what I called the super icon. And, I actually wound up hashing it out with that guy in person, and I said, I can understand why you were being a dick. It is what it is. So we, I had a conversation with the managing agent as well, where I said, it seems, I actually, I don't think I posted this part of the video, but there was a part where I said, it's 1930 square feet, and the guy goes, it's actually 2,200, and I said, you're being a landlord. And he goes, no, it is. And I go, here's the tool. You're like, I was the typical way that I am on stream with him. I just said, you're being a landlord. I mean that, and I mean that in the worst way possible. And I was open with that whole deposit thing. If you're going to tell me that the last 3 months is standard, when nobody else asked for that, it's one thing to ask for something special. It's another to say it's standard, because that shows me that you have the propensity to do what I call putting the tip in. So if you think you have an opportunity to put the tip in without consent, you will do that, and I don't like that very much. I don't like people who try to put the tip in under false pretenses. But they had, he called me and really wanted to speak to me after I told Alan I don't want this place anymore, and he convinced me to come back to the negotiating table. So I did, and I saw the space with several contractors. I showed you the bills I got from them. The lowest one I got from the guy who knows a guy, not totally above board legit, was in the $120K range, not including electrical. Electrical would have been an additional $10 to $20K. It's just not a great deal. So I said 6 free months and I'll take it. And they came back with 4. They also managed to, after offering the 4 months, also see my video where I called the super a cunt, and I said, I was talking about the managing agent trying to put the tip in. They weren't happy with that, but they were still open to doing a deal. Just financially speaking, before they even saw my video, before they saw anything, they were clear. They're like, 6 months, not going to fucking happen. 4 months, take it or leave it. So Alan thinks we could have potentially gotten a better deal if they weren't offended. I don't think so, because I had already walked away once, and even after walking away once, they were only open to 4 months concession. I left it behind. A lot of people said that this was a bad idea, that I was being too picky, that I was purposely being picky, that I don't even intend to rent a space, that I want too much, that I'm not open to compromise, that I should just pay it. And I think that many of these individuals, something tells me that if it was $1.7 to $1.8 million of their money, would not call themselves picky or whiny if they were putting in research and effort and time before spending that money. Because this is a $1.7 to $1.8 million commitment that I'm making here, and that's not the type of commitment that I'm just going to make willy-nilly. So I fervently disagree with the individuals that said the points I bring up are not valid, and I still do. I can see where you're coming from, but at the end of the day, I veto and I disagree. And I decided to keep it moving. So even if we were able to negotiate 6 months, which we would not be able to, I would be dealing with building management that has a good reason to dislike me, since I've talked about them on the internet. That they were fairly aggravated that they said he was disparaging, he was mean to the super, and he was making disparaging comments about the building, and he was making disparaging comments about the electrical panel. And when we got to that point, it's just like, listen, you can't be mad that I put a camera in front of your building and showed people the way you're comfortable showing it. I said this about the restaurant as well. You can't be mad that I showed that you're okay with roaches fighting to the death in your basement, that you're not going to even pay $300 to get that shit exterminated before showing it to potential tenants. That's on you. If you don't want me to make disparaging comments about your super, hire a super that doesn't act like a dick. If you want me to not make disparaging comments about the way you negotiate, don't negotiate like a dick. If you want me to not make disparaging comments about your electrical panel, have an electrical panel that doesn't look like shit. Just basic stuff. Show your space without holes in the wall if you want me to be nice to your building. But, it is what it is. That deal is done and gone. Now, to get on to the more important part here, is I was speaking to Alan about looking for a new space, and he was saying it's going to be very difficult, if not damn near impossible, to find a space that was as affordable as 30th Street in any kind of condition, and that this is going to be a very difficult thing to do. Perhaps it will be. You know, I may have to make some concession on price. I may have to be willing to pay a little bit more to get a space in better condition, or perhaps I will have to get a space that's a little further away from centralized subway location. I'm not going to get a space on 30th and 6th, right, a few blocks away from every single train, if the price and condition I want is still what it is. And now, fair enough. And he also wanted to bring up with me the broker fee. Now, this is something he seemed uncomfortable discussing because he thought maybe it's premature, and it's also just not a pleasant conversation. But smaller landlords, from what I learned from this conversation, tend to screw the broker. It's very similar to that scene in Prison Break at the last season where I forget the actor's name. It's the guy that plays in Boston Public as well as in Prison Break, and he plays a villain.
What I wouldn't give to see the look on the general's face.
What the hell are you doing? We need him alive to sell this thing!
You heard what he said. Buyer's already on the way. Think I'm gonna give this clown 30% for just making introductions?
And that's apparently how a lot of the small landlords seem to be. The way Alan explained it to me when it comes to dealing with small landlords. Imagine working in consumer electronics repair, fixing the device, and then saying to the customer, you can pay the invoice after you get home online. You can keep your device, once you get home, pay the invoice. I'm not saying everybody's going to be dishonest. I'm not saying that nobody's going to pay. I'm just saying that repair shop's probably going to have a lot less money in their bank account than they would if they charged the customer before they left the store. Many of the smaller landlords are not very forthcoming and honest when it comes to dealing with the broker. There is an incentive for the broker to not show those spaces. And he also brought up that if they're willing to screw over the broker, they're also likely willing to screw over the tenants. So I'm not as comfortable showing people those spaces. I agree and I disagree, because the tenant is a source of recurring revenue, whereas the broker is, if you're a small landlord, a source of one-time revenue. So if I have 10 buildings, I'm not going to screw over the broker because there's 10 different buildings with 5 floors of offices, maybe 5 offices a floor and 10 or 20 retail spaces. There's probably going to be some turnover and churn there. So I'm going to need a broker that consistently recommends my space because I need to find a large volume of people on a regular basis to take these spaces because there's going to be churn, especially if your building happens to be a landlord for WeWork, which I think is going to have more vacancies in the near future. But if you're a small building like the one that I'm in right now, you got like 4 or 6 apartments upstairs, 1 or 2 retail stores. You have very low churn rate if you have a reasonable price that you're asking. If you get a tenant for 10 years, even if it's a low rent, you're looking at, $400,000, $500,000 from them, whereas the broker is more expendable. So if they screw over the broker, they're not going to be able to find a tenant from that broker for that space. Maybe they get blacklisted from brokers, but so what? They think, I'm going to put a sign for rent in the window. Some tenant will eventually find it. I only need 1 space rented, so it's no big deal if I don't have volume. I get where I'm not saying it's moral or ethical for the landlord to screw the broker, but I am saying I understand economically why they do it, and I also don't take it personally as a tenant if the landlord is the type to try to screw the broker. I don't necessarily think that means they're going to try to screw the tenant, because there is a financial incentive for the landlord to not screw the tenant long term, because they are receiving money from the tenant not just once but every month. The broker provides a service once. The tenant provides money monthly. So even if the landlord's a piece of shit, he's probably less likely to screw the tenant than he is the broker. I'm not saying it's right, but from a purely Darwinian point of view, I am not in complete agreement that a landlord who screws the broker is necessarily going to screw the tenant. So what he wanted to discuss with me is, if I show you these buildings, which expands our search query, would you be open to paying me if the landlord stiffs me? And I said, sure, because I figured it was 1 month fee. So if you find me a $12,000 space, it's like $12,000 or $15,000, right? This is where I realized that I may have been punching over my weight. Thank you, Erica. I believe I'm punching over my weight, because he told me that if I had signed the 30th Street lease, the broker's fee would have been somewhere in the $30,000 to $40,000 range for a store that was $12,833. Wow. And I was upfront and I said, Alan, I would pay your fee. I was under the impression it was 1 month of rent. I value your services. I don't want to lowball you. It's not my intention to lowball you. But to me, the value of the service you offer is worth about 1 month rent. Maybe a little more on top of it because you've been an honest, good guy. But it's not, to me, I don't value the service at $30,000 to $40,000. So if you find me a space, I will compensate you, but I will not compensate you what you expect. If you're okay working with this going forward, great. If you're not, I understand and I respect it. I'm not gonna ask you to work for less money. I'm not gonna suggest that you should lower your fee, but this is what I'm willing to spend. And I also had a conversation with my father about it. My father makes me sound tactful and politically correct by contrast, which is it's very difficult to get across the way that my father talks. And he was fairly animated in saying what he thought of a $30,000 to $40,000 fee. And Alan was very, very receptive to this. He goes, Louis, it's fine. I know that I'm going to get something from you. If first month's rent or something is what you'd be open to paying, I'll take it. And you could even pay it over a period of several years. I'm totally okay with that. So he's still helping and looking for a new space. The thing is, this dialogue brought up something that I was not aware of. I thought that the broker got 1 month rent. If they're getting this type of money, then I can see how this would narrow the search query considerably. Because the smaller landlords, since their profit margins are less, because they have less, and also the amount of money they make is less because they have less spaces, they're going to be less open to paying that type of fee, which means I'm not seeing the smaller spaces. Now, even if the smaller buildings and the smaller landlords have more fucked up spaces, the reality here is that that's exactly what I'm looking for. People continuously tell me that I shouldn't keep making the stupid joke from John Grossbard, which is if I made this place any nicer, you couldn't afford it. But the thing is, that's not a joke. It's a way of life. So Eli, the computer guy, has these F-Linus mugs, and he says it's not an insult, it's a way of life. And for me, that saying, if I made this any nicer, you couldn't afford it, it's not a joke, it's a way of life in New York City. I'm a small repair shop. I'm funded by myself. I'm funded by the work that I do. I built this up over many years. I'm not I'm not a WeWork where I get $8 billion in SoftBank money, and if I fuck that up, I can just get another 8 just because I'm so special. I'm not a publicly traded company. I'm not independently wealthy. I wasn't born with a silver spoon. I built this myself. I can't afford premium real estate. I can't afford white glove service. I need a space that is just a little bit grungy, a little bit ghetto, in some way where the concession would be okay for me to take in order for it to be a space that I can actually afford. And the issue here is if those spaces are crossed off the search, I probably would have not found my current location. I'm not talking about Hub NYC. Fuck Hub. Fuck the whole, I email you back and forth and call you for 3 months and I can't get you to tell me if I can install, at my expense, a mini split system in the space I'm paying rent on so that my employees have heat in the winter and air conditioning in the summer. Fuck. It's hard to not curse them out every single video, but I'm going to try. Prior to the owner retiring, it was owned by another gentleman named Alan. He is also an Alan, but he's an Alan with an E and 2 L's. Or somebody said in Alan the Rosinski's comments, the fake Allens with the 2 L's and the E, the improper spelling. He was pretty old, and he was looking to retire. He was the type of person where if you said broker fee, he would go, no broker fee, no pay fee. He was that type of landlord. He was a 100-year-old Korean guy, just no bullshit. He took care of the building. It wasn't a white glove service building. It wasn't the nicest building, but we had heat in the winter. Hint, Hub NYC. We had heat in the winter. If I called him, he responded immediately. He gave me his personal cell phone, and it wasn't, we'll get back to you. He responded immediately. Anytime I had an issue, somebody would show up. The only time I ever had a problem, there was a gas smell in the basement, and he wasn't able to come out quickly because he and the super were not there. We called Con Edison. They found the gas leak with some little sensor thing, and he was pissed that I called Con Ed, because when you call Con Ed about a gas leak, it gets reported, which means you probably have to pay $10,000 to $30,000 in construction to fix shit that they would find that's not the code. He was not very happy. Understandable, typical New York landlord shit, but nothing too terrible. But he's the type of landlord I wanted, because when I rented my space, it was 650 square feet with a basement for $3,500 on an avenue in the East Village with high foot traffic. I needed that. I saw many spaces that cost $8,000 to $9,000 at the time that I had a broker telling me, this is what you're going to get. They showed me a $1,700 space around St. Mark's and Avenue A that, I'm not kidding, was like 250 square feet. This place was a fucking box. And then they showed me a space that was about $8,000 or $9,000 that then became an eyeglass store on the corner around, I think it was 9th Street and 1st Avenue. I forget. No, 9th is the pizza place. 10th Street and 1st Avenue, it's the place that became the glasses store. It was over $8,000. And they said, you're probably not going to find cheaper or better than this. And eventually that broker washed his hands with me. And then I walked 2 blocks away and I found the current store that I have. Why did I find it? A, it was off the radar of a broker because the broker was not interested in seeing a space where they wouldn't get a fee or they had to extract it from the client. And B, it was kind of a bit of a shithole, you know? It was like one of those rusty cars where you take off the floor mat while you're driving and you look down and you can see the street. I was able to see to the basement from the first floor. That's not exactly desirable. The space needed some work. If you think it looks like a shithole now, just imagine if you saw what it looked like in December 2011. Nasty. But this is what I needed, because I needed a large space, and 650 square feet for a store was large to me at the time. I had 1 or 2 employees, not 13. This was a good space, and it was cheap, and it would have been off the radar for a broker. So this is something that I have to take into consideration, because the very space that I have right now, I'm looking to duplicate this. I want to get a larger version of what I have now, a space that needs a little bit of work, but not too much work, that's a good deal in a good area, because the landlord is not paying extraneous fees, but also not looking to make the highest amount of money possible. They just want a stable tenant, and they're willing to charge a reasonable rate to get a reasonable tenant. And this is the kind of space that will be off the radar. So I'm going to keep looking with Alan and see what I find. But I do wonder if I'm going to be missing out on those types of spaces, and if I have already. It's just the question has to be asked. And I do appreciate that Alan's brought it up. He said that typically the broker doesn't tell you this, or they'll make you sign an exclusivity agreement, which forces you to pay the fee on paper so that they can't get screwed over if you do rent the space. But I don't feel comfortable doing that. And he seemed very uncomfortable trying to advocate for himself, which kind of made me sad, because, I mean, the thing that makes me sad about the modern world is that the people who are the most honest and humble are typically the people that get steamrolled, and also are the people that don't advocate for themselves, which is why I wanted people to find his channel, to find his website, and why I'm happy that he's got 20 or 22,000 subscribers now. So that's where I'm at now, and we will see what happens from there.